I had a request for a black-eyed Susan or coneflower demo, and I thought I would just show you guys a very quick and simple way to create these loose florals. You can spend a lot more time and make them look more detailed, but this is just a fun, easy, loose way, maybe a warm-up before you work on another painting. So I like to put a dot where the top of the flower will be. So if you think about a black-eyed Susan or a coneflower, it's going to kind of be shaped like this with the center part of the flower up top. And you would be looking at the side of the black-eyed Susan. We're in the middle of allergy season here in Memphis, so I'm a little hoarse. I'm using this Van Gogh size 8, and I'm really liking these brushes right now. I have a 12 and I have an 8. You can get a pack of 3 at blick.com for $9.99, I think. So I'm gonna load up my brush with really wet paint, but not dripping. And you can literally lay your brush down to get a petal. And all I'm doing is just putting the entire belly of the brush and dragging it down. And you're gonna need to turn your paper. So that's one way to create those petals, and I would do a lighter petal and then let it dry and come back with a little bit darker pigment. Another way is to draw in the petal in that shape that I just drew. So you can literally draw a teardrop. And I try not to get too precise because in nature things vary. So let's do this with pink. If we were doing a coneflower, it's kind of a purpley pink. And the same thing. You could draw your petals. Just a couple of swipes. And if I don't get it exactly right, that's okay. I can come back with some brighter pigment and drop in as this starts to dry. Same thing with this black-eyed Susan. I can come back over it with a second petal to give some dimension. For the black-eyed Susan, you're gonna have a dark center. And if you do that while it's still wet, it will bleed into your petal a little bit. And I don't mind that effect. It's really pretty for a sunflower. For the coneflower, it has kind of a yellow-orange center, and it's gonna stick up a little bit more. And I would let that center on the coneflower dry all the way and then come back and do the little spiky things that stick up. A great place to find some reference photos is unsplash.com, UNSPLASH. So if you want even a little bit more dimension, you can come back with another color. And I like to leave a little bit of white space. As it dries, you can layer in these petals on top. And because everything is still pretty wet, you can't see a ton of dimension. And once it's totally dry, you could come back and do some dark lines. Same thing on the black-eyed Susan. So let's put these together in a little composition. And I'm gonna go ahead and make some dots so I have some reference points. And maybe I'll do one big coneflower in the top. So I'm gonna just swipe. I might need to get some more water. So I want this first layer to be pretty transparent. So I'll leave that there. Clean off my brush and make some black-eyed Susans. And I'm literally just swiping for this first layer. With the tip of the brush on these. Maybe this one isn't open that far. Let's get another little coneflower in here. I don't know if these would ever like grow near each other, but in my painting they are. All right, we're gonna let that dry for a minute. All right, now that this is dry, we'll come back with a little bit darker orange yellow, and I'm using New Gamboge and Hansa Yellow Light. And I might be a little more defined. And you don't have to go exactly in the middle of all these. Since mine isn't totally dry all the way, these petals aren't defined like I really want them to be. The longer you let it dry, you'll get hard edges on these second petals. A little more like this one. So some happy things can happen in here, and I may let that dry totally before I come back again and do another layer. I'm gonna go ahead and put a little bit of brown up here in the top while it's still wet. And let that bleed just a little bit. It's not going to on the small one. And if you don't like that look, you can let it dry all the way. And I'm gonna get the coneflower top going. If you don't want to see your pencil marks, be sure and erase those or lift them off with the kneaded eraser before you start painting. Because once paint is on there, it's much harder to get pencil off. Almost impossible. So I'm going to mix up a couple of different greens. I'm going to get a green gold going with a sap green. And I'm still using the same brush size. I'm just going to... Coneflower stem is a little thicker. And we'll get this black-eyed Susan going. Maybe that one's going that way, just with a very light touch. I may want the coneflower to have a little bit darker, so I can add in some brown to my green, some sepia, or pull in some perylene green and just drop in a little bit of dark on here. It'll give it some dimension. So I'm not really sure what coneflower leaves look like. So I'm just gonna do some bladey looking. Same thing with this black-eyed Susans. No idea. So I'm making up my own leaves. This is my painting. I can do that, right? And I may add some extra grass down here just to kind of fill in. I could have done a light blue wash in the background before I got started to make it kind of look like sky. I also could have done a green wash at the bottom to make it feel like it's in a meadow. And all you're seeing in focus are these. So maybe I add a little bit of wash in here. Wow. I'm painting. I could still come back and add some blue. So let's see if I can get a little bit of more dimension in the coneflower. It's still a little wet. Just taking a little bit darker purple and making some lines. And all of a sudden it starts to give it some dimension. Same thing here. Now this is the effect I kind of want to go for with my black-eyed Susans if they're dry. So I'm going to get a darker, see if I can kind of define some of these petals. And this is working nicely. Just a little bit darker yellow-orange, and I start to see a little bit of depth. That one looks a little crazy. That's okay. Let's see if we can fix it. That one may be a little too far gone. Who knows? Once it's all done, it won't matter. Okay, so now if you want the top of your black-eyed Susan to be darker, you can add in a little bit more color. Because remember, our watercolor is going to dry back lighter. So now I'm going to try and get a darker color than the top of the coneflower. And I want to just do some little tick marks so it looks like that spiky head. So let's see if I can do that. Now I'm going to need to roll my brush because it has gotten a little not pointed. I want to make sure I got a nice decent little point there. I'm going to turn my board so it's a little easier for me naturally. Just do some tiny little tick marks. Give the idea of those spikes. And if you feel like you're starting to get too consistent with your little marks in length and placement, just turn your board. Okay. So that's looking pretty good. Now, if I still want a little bit of sky, it's not too late. I can wash in some sky around the flowers without touching them. So I'm gonna get a really, really wet brush with just a little bit of blue. Just to give it a little something in the background. And I don't want hard edges, so look, I accidentally touched my black-eyed Susan, and that's okay. I am playing and practicing. So I want to encourage you to, get in here and play and practice with some florals and see what kind of fun coneflowers and black-eyed Susans you can make. And I'd love for you to share them with me. You can follow me on Instagram at Stacy with an E, L as in Lee, Meredith, Meredith. Also on YouTube under Meredith Design Co. So All right, we'll let that dry and see how it looks. Enjoy.